My name is Josh Floyd, and I'm a board-certified family law attorney here at Jimenez Floyd Family Law Firm.
My name's Christina Jimenez, and I'm also a board-certified family law attorney.
And today we're going to discuss temporary restraining orders. Some counties refer to them as standing orders, but some counties don't have standing orders, so it's temporary restraining order. And a lot of people get freaked out when they receive a temporary restraining order, and there's a lot of misunderstanding tied with temporary restraining orders. So we're going to hopefully open up your mind a little bit and educate you.
So let's just kind of talk about what a temporary restraining order is and what a standing order is. So in some counties that we practice in, so Denton has them, I think Tarrant County has them, Dallas County has them. There is a thing called a standing order. And in the standing order, it is essentially an order that all the judges will sign that when you file your petition, both parties are going to be bound by certain rules, right? And it's things that I always tell people, these are things that you should not be doing anyway, so you really don't need to get worked up over them. It's things like don't destroy property, don't sell property, don't cancel insurance benefits, don't
Use passwords, open each other's mail,
don't
run off
threaten
with a
each
child.
other. Yeah.
Don't be a jerk.
Don't hit each. That's what I tell them all the time. Don't be a jerk. So these things are typically, there's about 30 of them that will be incorporated into a standing order, and they're designed to preserve property and protect children and to protect or to give you guidance on your conduct. Right. When you file in these counties that have the standing orders, they'll be attached to your petition, and when you're served with that petition, you are then bound by that standing order. If you are the person who files the petition, you are bound by that standing order. And so you need to make sure that you take the time, review that document so you understand what the rules are. A standing order is going to be the same as a temporary restraining order, essentially. The only difference is
the person filing them is not bound by them. Although I tell my clients, follow it anyway, right? But a temporary restraining order orders the other person to follow these rules. It doesn't order you to, but you should still follow the orders.
yes.
I think one of the biggest confusing points on the temporary restraining order is the can't communicate with the other person in a harassing manner or whatever, right? They read the first sentence. It's like, I can't talk to the other person. Like, that's not what it says. Like, you have to read the entire sentence.
Right.
You can talk, just
Right.
don't be a jerk.
Right. Right. And so the difference between the standing order and the restraining order is in the counties that don't have standing orders for whatever reason, when you file your petition for divorce, you have to file an application or a request for a temporary restraining order. And then the judge that is in that court reviews the request, the temporary restraining order. And it's typically done what we call ex parte, which means that you don't have to give notice to the other side. And especially if it is a standard protocol, like the standard rules, the things that we just discussed, then there's not going to be really any additional or any guff from the judge. Like they'll typically just sign that.
Guff, that's a legal term.
and they'll typically sign the temporary restraining orders, and then after that you process it and then you serve the other side with it. But every single time, almost every time when I have a consultation, people do get very worked up when they're served with a restraining order. They think like, I cannot believe he did this or she did this. And I just want to kind of say, like, don't get worked up over it. Okay. So there are some things called extraordinary relief requests that we can make where they can deny possession and access of your children, they can keep possession and access, they can issue a writ of attachment for your children. That's an advanced topic that we can have a whole other podcast on. If those are in your TRO, then I understand getting worked up. But if it is a basic TRO or a basic standing order, they happen in probably 99% of the divorces that we file, because we just want to make sure, and the courts just want to make sure that people are not being nuts once this process begins.
Yeah, and a lot of people use temporary restraining order and protective order synonymously, and they're completely different, two totally different things, right? So if you get a temporary restraining order, understand it's not a protective order, it's not a family violence thing, it's not a you got to get out of the house type of thing. It's just what I tell my clients is leave everything the way it is right now until we get to court. That's all a temporary restraining order does.
Exactly. In a protective order, those are more in line with family violence allegations. There's criminal consequences. And so, one of the things that you have to be very much aware of whenever this process starts is you have to take the time to actually read the documents, right? And you have to educate yourself, which, if you're listening to this, that's hopefully what you're trying to do. And also consult with an attorney that practices in your area so that they can explain to you, okay, this is a protective order. Here's the consequences of that. This is just a temporary restraining order. Here's the consequences of that. Um, they're typically needed. I think that it's very, very rare that I will not request a temporary restraining order in a case. It has to be something like, the parties have been separated for years and things have been very calm, or they already have an agreement, or maybe the other person lives in another country, or it's very rare that I choose to not file one. I would say, again, in 99% of our cases we file it just to make sure nothing crazy happens.
Yeah. And so I guess that's the purpose of it. That was the next topic, right? Is to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that nothing else happens. What about violating them, right? So they're just as enforceable as any other court order, right? It is an order. It is signed by the judge, whether it be a temporary restraining order or a standing order. They're both signed by the judge. And so you're bound by them. And if you violate those, you're subject to all the other enforcement, I guess remedies is the right word, but you can be held in contempt, you can be sentenced to jail, you can be fined up to $500 for each violation. So it is something that you have to take very seriously. It's just not as restrictive as most people believe it to be.
Right, right. And the other thing is that temporary restraining orders are valid for 14 days. Okay. And typically the idea is that we're going to get into court for your first hearing in those 14 days, but sometimes that can't happen. And so then it has to get extended. But if that is an active temporary restraining order and you violate it, there can be severe consequences. And even if that temporary restraining order expires and then you choose to violate it after because it's not in effect, maybe you can't go to jail for it, but it's not going to sit well with the judge. And so, and kind of like what Floyd was explaining earlier, if even though you're the one serving the temporary restraining order, still hold yourself to the same standard, because that's going to be the conduct that the courts are looking for, and that's going to be what they will respect, and it will work out better for you. Yeah.
I think that's it.
I think that's it.
I think you're now educated on temporary restraining orders.
And we do have a more extensive podcast if you want to go to our YouTube channel and learn a lot more about temporary restraining orders.
More than you ever wanted to know.
We'll have a lot more information there, but this is just a brief overview.